What is up, mindset hackers? Thank you so much for joining me here today. On this episode, I'm going to be talking about a question that I get asked about all the time. The question is, how do I turn down the volume inside of my head when it comes to that negative voice, right? And that negative voice, I think a lot of us can relate to that. There's so many people that deal with this, and it can show up in different ways depending on who you are. Sometimes it, shows up as limiting beliefs where that voice is telling you, you can't do that, or I'm not good enough, or I don't think I can do this, giving us that self-doubt, right? Sometimes it shows up a little bit more evil than that. It could be like serious negative self-talk where we're actually being really cruel to ourselves and we're saying mean and nasty and judgmental things. And then this third one is something that I hear about from a lot of entrepreneurs, which is imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is that feeling of I'm not worthy of this type of success. And that can be like you're working on something new and you see somebody else that is like so far ahead of you, or at least you think that somebody's ahead of you, and it makes you feel less than, and it makes you afraid to go out there and put yourself out into the world. But all three of these can be very debilitating. And after this break, I'm going to tell you some really cool mindset hacks on how to turn down the volume when it comes to the negative voice inside of your head. Welcome to the Mindset Hackers podcast, where we will help you level up both personally and professionally. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's get going. Well, hello there and welcome back. So before we dive into this, I would love you to do me a favor and drop down and hit the subscribe button. Do that right now, and then we'll dive into how to turn down the volume on your negative mindset. So first thing I wanted to talk about is like, where does this even come from? Like, why would I have this voice inside my head that's saying all these negative things towards me? Well, here's the reality is what we're doing is just like what we do with a lot of other people. We're judging, okay? And it was so interesting because like years ago, I started to realize this. I'm like, I have those judgmental thoughts and I don't have them as much about myself, but I used to have them a lot more about other people. And I would see somebody and some type of an image would come into my mind. I'd come to this conclusion and I would recognize that this judgment would spring up. So I was like, why does that happen? Like, why am I judging that person? I don't even know who they are. And the reality is, if you think about it, anytime you judge yourself or judge other people, what it's indicating is there's some type of an insecurity that's inside of me. And so I learned to basically program my mind. So anytime I would have a judgment come up, anytime I'd catch myself like judging somebody, I'd be like, that just happened. What sprung that? What is the thing that triggered that? What is it inside of me that is insecure that caused me to have that judgmental thought? Now, the same thing goes with ourselves. If we are like saying negative things about ourselves, like I can't do this, or being really mean, like I'm so stupid, what's happening is you're doing the same thing as I was talking about how we judge other people. We're doing the same thing to ourselves. We're judging ourselves, which means that there's something inside of us that we're insecure about. And so it's really becomes a practice of being aware of this, of noticing that when you do this and creating a little bit of space from the thought and the feeling and asking yourself, like, why is that happening? What is it inside of me that's making me feel like that? And usually, well, not usually, all forms of these negative all forms of negative voice inside your head roots down to one thing, is the insecurity of some form of I'm not enough. And I'm going to talk to you about why that happens. Like, what was it that caused that in the first place? So before we dive into that, just recognize that it's a really good idea. Every time you hear these thoughts, it's okay, totally normal, just a judgment. Notice them, first of all, and then start to create some distance and ask yourself, well, why did I even have that thought? And I'm going to tell you a couple of reasons why we have that hole inside of us, that feeling of lack that causes these feelings of insecurity. And this starts from when we're a kid, right? We are growing up and we're just like these limitless human beings. And we have all these adults always telling us, no, don't do that. You're doing it wrong, right? And a kid hears like no, probably like 80 times more than they hear a yes or a good job. So we're constantly and our parents aren't meaning to do that in most cases, right? They're there to help us out. But, I even catch myself saying this a lot of times, no, you're not doing that right. But when you hear that over and over, it's starting to program you like right and wrong, like I'm doing something right or I'm doing something wrong. And more often we're hearing that we're doing things wrong. And that's just the nature of us being children. And over time, that starts to subconsciously program us to believe that at some level we're not enough, right? And then we start to go to school, and here's where it really kicks in, right? You start to have school cliques and stuff. You want to hang out with a certain group, and that group kind of like, doesn't really let you in, or you feel like you're not fitting in, you feel a little bit rejected. And that's another form of feeling not enough. And it creates this like hole inside of us that starts to build up bigger and bigger over time. And then, you start to see the stuff in the media and advertising. I remember growing up, there would always be all these like advertisements, like teaching you, basically programming me that I need to have this and have this lifestyle in order to be successful. When, later in life, I realized that that's all an untruth as well. Like I'm perfect the way I am. I don't need to buy certain things or look a certain way to be the equivalent that that the media thinks that I need to be, or advertising. You see this in the movies all the time too, right? Like think about the movies that you've watched throughout your whole childhood, like all this stuff out there, all these movies and TV shows that portray like this perfect lifestyle, right? And we get programmed to think that that's how it should be. So we're always living in this constant state of lack and unworthiness because we've been told this, we've been shown this like our whole entire life. Then we get into relationships, or maybe a lot of people, they deal with this in their own family. They feel some rejection or some abandonment. Their parents, get divorced, right? And when you're a kid, it's really hard to understand that. And a lot of kids feel like, well, I must have done something wrong. This must be my fault. And again, that's adding to this feeling of not enoughness. And I would say, like, as we get older in life, we get into some relationships too, where we can be, very hurt by somebody else. And that can leave us with these deep scars, these deep wounds. Here's another crazy example of how this can show up too, is like maybe we didn't have like that type of an upbringing. Maybe like we felt very supported by our family. Maybe we've been almost too supported, where like our parents were always behind us, always like telling us how good we are, always celebrating when we were like winning competitions and stuff, or winning the piano championship, whatever it was. But like, this is what I've seen too, is like the ego can be stroked to a point where it's like, you're afraid to put it out there. Okay. This is a big problem too. And this is why, like in growth mindset, it talks about like praising the effort instead of the outcome, because, you could have like a perfect childhood and your parents, well-meaning, may have been really, really hyper-focused on the outcomes. And as you get older in life, you start to fear failure, because like all your life you've been told how good you are. But once you start hitting the real world, that ego is trying to protect itself. Again, this feeling of not enoughness. So if you think about all these negative voices like imposter syndrome, limiting beliefs, and negative self-talk, these stem from this feeling of unworthiness inside. So really getting to the bottom of this is to like understand where they come from, track it down, and then to fill in that hole that you have inside of you, and give yourself some radical self-love, man. Like, I love it because I don't have to deal with this. Like, I really don't have this negative voice inside my head. I'm so grateful for that. But I know it's a problem that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of the people that I coach deal with this too. And, at some degree, I do hear like a minor voice of negativity when I'm going really big. But like, to me, the way that I've trained myself to think is like, that is a good thing. It means I'm pushing myself outside of my comfort zones. And so that's what I want for you. So I'm going to give you a couple ideas on how to turn down that voice. The first thing I want you to do is, like, it's really important to get some space around that, whatever that negative voice is saying. So what I want you to do is grab a piece of paper, and anytime you have a thought like that, a negative thought, maybe if you're saying something mean to yourself, if you're saying something that's, like a limiting belief, write it down so that you can track it down, so that you can isolate it and know when that comes up. Write down as many as you can think of on a piece of paper. Okay. So that way you have some awareness around it. You have some awareness of what that voice is saying. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out is, like, as you have that list of, I can't do this, I'm not enough, whatever it is. Okay. I want you to ask yourself, is that even true? It's total bullshit. That's what's so crazy, is like, as you write these down, you will realize that the negative voice inside your head is complete bullshit. So what I want you to do is, now that you have those listed out on a piece of paper, I want you to write down the opposite. What is the opposite of that? And write it on the other side, on the other column. So take a piece of paper and draw a line down in the middle. So you have two columns. One side, write down all your negative self-talk, all the things that you say to yourself that are holding you back. And then ask yourself, is that even true? And I guarantee you're going to be like, no. And if you still don't believe it, maybe share this with somebody that is close to you. Talk them through it, and they will help you see that those negative thoughts that you're having are completely false, complete bullshit. They are manufactured by your subconscious mind because there's this ego inside of you that is afraid of being wounded. Okay, now what I want you to do is flip the script on that. What is the opposite of that negative voice? Take that statement and write the exact opposite on the other side. Okay, that's the first step, is doing this like journaling drill so that you're aware of everything that comes up. And next time, as you start to hear this more and more, you can say, oh, okay, I hear that. That's the negative voice in my side of my head. What is the opposite? What triggered that? Why did that come up? And then that way you kind of step outside of those negative thoughts. Okay, here's the step number 2, or tip number 2. This is one of my favorites. Okay, I love teaching this. Like in some of my higher level coaching programs, I teach this. I call this the alter ego exercise. And you've already done the groundwork with step number 1, with exercise number 1. You did the journaling assignment with all your negative self-talk or your narrative on one end, and you flipped it over and you have the positive narrative on the other. So I call this the alter ego exercise. And if you think about it, like in superhero stories, there's a superhero, but they usually have like an alter ego, like that's the opposite of them. I love to think about like Fight Club, right? Fight Club with Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, right? They're like opposite of each other. And so the way that I look at inside of my head is like, I have an alter ego that is the negative side of me, that has those negative mindsets and those negative thoughts, those negative statements. And I've actually given him a name. Okay, so I call it, I don't know where this came up, but I call him Stan, like on that Eminem video. After you watch this video, go check out the Eminem video Stan, and that's where I came up with this. Okay, so give your alter ego a name, the one that has the negative voice, and that way you can create even more space. And then also give yourself like a superhero name, right? Like I'm a big fan of the Mandalorian. Mandalorian's badass. He's got like all these awesome weapons, all these, protects his baby Yoda. You know, I adopted a son, so that's something that resonates with me. But pick yourself a superhero or a hero in real life. What is the hero version of yourself? Give that person a name. And then you have kind of like these two, like, a superhero and an alter ego inside of you. And I think that we have both of those inside of us. We tend to kind of weigh towards the negative side in most occasions, but we can also tap into the positive side anytime you want. So when the voice comes up, ask yourself who's talking. Is this Stan or is this the Mandalorian that's talking? So create your alter ego. Is this the alter ego talking? And when you hear that voice, just be like, okay, I see you. I see what you're doing. You're trying to keep me safe, right? I'm trying to do something big, and you're trying to like help me out by keeping me like playing little inside of my comfort zone. But I got this. Okay, Stan, totally good. I appreciate you trying to help me out. And I'm going to actually choose to listen to The Mandalorian because we are going to do this. We're going to go huge. We're going to go big. And pick which one you want to listen to. You have the option to choose to create the meaning out of whatever you want. You can pick the weaker side of you or the stronger side. So I love that. That's called the alter ego and the superhero exercise. Last thing I would love to do is for you to do a visualization where you visualize the child version of yourself, where you were so limited, limitless, right? We are all born limitless beings. And a lot of times, when we talk about that negative voice inside of our head, and we boil it down like I talked to you about, it's this feeling of unworthiness that a lot of people get. And I want you to recognize this. When you were born as a child into this earth, you were given life, you were given breath, you were given opportunity, you were given a clean slate to go out there and create whatever it was that you want in life. Now, I would argue that any child, if you have a kid yourself, when a child's born, they're worthy of anything that they want. They're worthy of a beautiful relationship. They're worthy of making as much money as they want. They're worthy of doing the things they love. They're worthy of being free of being judged by other people and judged by themselves. Would you not agree with that? So if a child is born with this complete ability to be limitless, and they're so worthy of everything that they could possibly want, how could you not be worthy? If a child that has done nothing, if a beautiful child comes into this world and they enter this world and they're worthy of anything that they want, then how is it that they can be that way without having done anything in this world and you not being worthy? Okay. The answer to that is you are worthy, because doing something to get an outcome is completely different than being worthy. Okay. We are all worthy of anything that we want in our life. Okay. That is different than having to take action or do certain things to create an outcome. Okay. You still need to go create action. You still need to go do things to get the outcomes that you want, but that does not, it has nothing to do with being worthy. You, by default, you are worthy of everything that you want in life. Okay. So anyways, this last exercise that I want you to do is to think about that beautiful child version of yourself that still lies within you. Okay. And I love doing this visualization and visualizing myself in this beautiful field and meeting this young version of myself, this, maybe 4-year-old, 5-year-old. And I'll go sit down with them and hang out and give him love, radical self-love, give him love, tell him everything that he needs to hear. And like I said, I don't have like that negative voice in my head very much. It's like turned down very low, because a lot of these practices, and I do a lot of meditation. I think that helps, but I believe that we all can always fill up our cup even more when it comes to self-love. And I think of it like as an actual cup, and you're pouring self-love into this cup. And when you fill it up enough, then it will flow over. Okay. And when it flows over, you have plenty of love to give other people, and you don't need people to give it to you. They still will, but you're not needy for it. You're not pouring from an empty cup, so to speak. So I love this visualization, and you can do this in whatever setting you want, but think about meeting the child version of yourself and embracing that child full of love, giving that child and as much love as you can. Visualize yourself embracing and just holding that child and whispering into their ear how much you love them, and tell them how amazing they are and how worthy they are of getting anything that they want in their life. Okay. So anyways, I'm going to wrap this up. I just wanted to share this with you today. It means a lot to me because I care about you. I care about you doing, recognizing that you're worthy of anything that you want to in life. And I would appreciate it if you know somebody who could use this message. Please send this over to them. I'd love it if you share these. I hope these are impactful tips for you. These are tips that make a big difference for me in my life, as well as those of my clients. And please make sure, again, to subscribe to this podcast. And I want you to know that I am committed to getting the Mindset Hackers podcast into the top 1% in the world. So I would love it if you would follow me on Spotify, and please drop me a rating on there. Please like this video and leave your comments below. If you have some practices when it comes to self-love that you'd like to share with me, I would love to hear them. So drop down in the comments and let me know your number one tips when it comes to self-love. Thank you so much.